It's recording.
All right, perfect. All right, we'll call the meeting of our ASD governance meeting to order. It is Thursday, May 4th at 1 o'clock. We're here in the board conference room. Present are board members, President Bellamy, Vice President Jacobs, myself. Member Kelly Lessons is online and we'll shout out if any other members join us. We have Dr. Bryant and associated cabinet members and staff in the room as well with us. Thank you all for being present. I'm going to try and use our time as judiciously as possible. And if I steer from that, Madam President doesn't have a gavel, but she has other things she can toss my way to do.
Just a few.
With that said, we'll get started with the first item on our agenda, BP 5131.6. I've invited Mr. Michael Carson with the Matsu Opioid Task Force to be with us today. And Mr. Carson, thank you for being present. Mr. Carson is going to provide a brief overview of his work as the chair of the Matsu Opioid Task Force, as well as potentially touch on a measure that's working through the House Bill 6 that's running out of Representative George Rauscher's office, touching on a requirement to add additional curriculum to all middle and high schools in Alaska to address the ongoing opioid epidemic. And so, Mr. Carson, the floor is yours. We budgeted about 10 minutes for this, and we'll make time for questions too after we get started, and then we'll transition to a board policy that's accompanying and relevant. Sir.
Thank you again. Michael Carson, I'm the Vice President and the Recovery Specialist at My House of Matsu Runaway Drop-In Center. Besides chairing the Matsu Opioid Task Force, I chair the Matsu Youth Drug Prevention and Education. I sit on the state steering opioid community Partners for Change. The Matsu Opioid Task Force has partners with DEA. We have CDC partners, Dr. Ann Zink and the Department of Health. So we have multiple partners that we work with and collaborate to create strategies and solutions to the opioid epidemic. First things first, I am so grateful that those 10 overdoses that happened last week, there were none that were fatal. And I would like to sometimes change the language to poisonings because we know how dangerous fentanyl can be. When I make presentations, I hold up a 1 gram packet of Splenda. I say, if this was 1 gram of fentanyl, how many people would it kill? 500. If I took this number 2 pencil, as a former educator, and ripped it open, just the amount on the end of this pencil, 2 milligrams could be a fatal overdose. We know that fentanyl has contaminated heroin, cocaine, meth. It has contaminated pills, Percocet, Oxys, Adderall, and Oxycontin, and Xanax. There used to be 4 out of 10 pills had a fatal overdose. Now DEA is saying 6 out of 10. Just the other day, they're saying almost 99%. They don't even have the promised drug within them. And the ones that don't have fentanyl have other poisonings like heavy metals, rat poisonings, and antifreeze. The bottom line is that there is nothing safe out there unless it comes from a doctor or a licensed pharmacist. I'm sure you've heard of different rainbow fentanyl, comes in different forms, trying to attract our young people.
I picked up one of those yesterday, but I don't think I got it from a record.
Just last spring,
No, I mean, the little candy, they look like candies, is my point. Sorry, Mike, go on.
no worries. Last spring, we transitioned Project Hope. That's with OSMAT, the Office
Yeah.
of Substance Misuse and Addiction Prevention. We moved from Narcan to Cloxotto. The medical term is naloxone. This was only 4 milligrams. This is now 8. We needed to have a bigger bang for our buck to knock off the fentanyl off the opioid receptor for the brain and the spinal cord to send a message, you need to breathe, dude, or you're going to die. I wrote Kelsey's lesson, which I provided Carl, and hopefully you all have, about 5 or 6 years ago. And the good news is Kelsey's lesson is aligned with national standards. I worked with Carmen Ashley with the CDC. She was recommended by Dr. Jay Butler, who you may remember was the medical director for the state previous to Dr. Zink. I worked with her over a 6 or 8 month period, an hour or two each month to ensure that Kelsey's lessons that aligned with national health standards. So in short, all the i's have been dotted and the t's have been crossed. However, since that lesson is 5 or 6 years old and it talks basically about the neuroscience, what happens in the brain, basic neuroscience that middle school and high school kids can understand. A year ago, I had to add 4 addenda, and the second one is just on fentanyl, and I have to update the fentanyl addendum every 2 weeks. And the latest entry was the 10 overdoses or poisoning in Anchorage. Prior to that, 2 drug busts in Juneau, the airport, 5,000 pills at a rate of $150,000 street value, and then 2 weeks later, a traffic stop with 6,000 pills. That's 11,000 counterfeit pills with fentanyl. So we have moved from the opiate epidemic, which was pain medication that started in the 90s, pretty pharma. Then we moved to heroin, and now we're dealing with the beast, and that's what I refer to fentanyl. When I wanted to leave you with some latest hard copy information that I just received from the CDC. There's a couple pamphlets here, drugs in the brain. There's one on marijuana. There's one on opioids. There's a great poster in here. If you are interested in getting more, I might be able to put a good word in for you and get a good deal. I don't think we've met. I think you originally came from Texas.
That's right.
I did my undergraduate and graduate work at UT Austin.
Oh, yeah, me too.
My undergraduate,
Ooh, science.
my undergraduate degree is in child development, and my master's is in reading theory. And, I am open to any questions, concerns, suggestions that you may have. I am more than willing. I'm sure with Carl that if you are interested in me presenting Kelsey's lesson, providing any of this information to counselors, nurses, staff, I am more than willing to do that. You could videotape that, and then you could use that videotape to be able to also share with partners in Fairbanks, Kenai, and Juneau. I've already taught Kelsey's lesson a number of times, but the last 2 presentations I presented last year to the statewide school nurses, and some of your nurses might have been present. But then most recently, most of those presentations have been about fentanyl. The basic neuroscience of the brain is very interesting in that what happens is when the brain is bombarded with opioids, there's a phenomenon called down regulating where the receptors close down. They're trying to protect themselves. Then the person ends up using more to get the same effect. That's referred to as tolerance. More opioids, more downloading, less receptors, then dependence, and then it moves to addiction. Unfortunately, that process could be hijacked by fentanyl. With 1 pill can kill. So now the presentation has moved to more of an emphasis and focus on fentanyl because we know adolescence is a time to learn from mistakes. Unfortunately, one mistake could be their last. Nationally, adolescent drug use is on the decline, but the caveat is that youth that are misusing are using such much more potent drugs. Marijuana, 20 to 30% THC versus in the 60s, maybe 50. Then when you dab it, that's when you take that butane torch, concentrate it, that THC content could jump to 80%. And then we have youth that are eating Percocet, putting them on tin foil, using that butane torch to inhale that. So the drugs that are being used and misused are so much more potent than ever. So I wanted to provided Amanda with the ADN article that I believe that parents are vital partners. And that in Kelsey's lesson, there's a homework assignment where students go and they write a personal refusal skill. Not just say no, it's something, my life depends on this. I'm dedicated to my family. I'm dedicated to my career. And since when I work with youth at my house that are in recovery, I say you might, and they're trying to stay clean and sober, I suggest you might use a little humor and say, I'm trying to cut back. Whatever works, whatever turns your crank, just as long as it ain't crank. So providing, I believe in my mind, everyone wants our youth to be safe, healthy, and thriving. We might see different pathways to that, but I think that we can all agree on that. And I think information is vital. I believe that parents, I've done presentations where parents believe that the school, that it was their responsibility, and then I would bring this. And they just didn't have that information to pass on. So I'm really trying to work upstream and to be totally 100%, 110% honest with you. If we really wanted to make a true impact, we have to move upstream, cut off the flow, the river of addiction. I'm all about pulling people out, getting involved in detox and treatment and recovery, but we need to cut off the flow. But what we really need to do, to be completely honest with you, is besides going upstream, we need to drill down and start talking about trauma, ACEs, trauma-informed schools. That's what we really, truly want to make that impact. But according to Dr. Christopher Jones with the CDC, who I've had many discussions about the best strategies for upstream primary prevention, he said, Michael, the facts and data are a safe place to start. And that's all Kelsey's lesson is. It's just straight facts and data. It's not a catchy one-liner or slogan dares, it's not a scare tactic like Reefer Madness. It's just laying those facts out for kids to hopefully, so they have that information to make better choices. I am more than welcome to answer anyone's tough questions.
I don't know that it's tough. I just think it's so timely. So thank you for your work on this and for making time to share. I mean, I think we're all feeling a sense of urgency.
Yes, ma'am.
I know HB6, what is your assessment of, where is it? Is it looking like it's gonna?
Probably not this session. And I believe that hopefully there might be able to have, I testified in front of the House Health and Social Services. They're hoping to have at least some public testimony before the end of the session.
Yeah.
And Madam Chair, what I'm hoping to do before the end of the session in 2 weeks is seek out a senator so that we can have a complementary Senate bill to complement the House bill. And so I have many senators that have said that they're very supportive of Matt Clayman, Gray Jackson. So I'm just going to look for someone that would be willing to sponsor it so that next year what we have is we have two bills running parallel side by side. I'm sure you're very familiar with curriculum. It's unfortunately outdated. The last time I checked in Matsu, where I'm from, I taught for 35 years in the Matsu School District. I taught 8 at the college. So I've written a couple of lesson plans. And what I would like to see is that what we can do is, I don't see this as, this is a nonpartisan issue. This is affecting our kids. And so what we need to do is address that way. So I am going to see if I can find, like I said, a senator that would have a complementary parallel or, track on both sides.
And it is worth noting that Representative Story and Armstrong in the House co-sponsored the bill in addition to Representative McKay, and then Rauscher because in primary, so it is bipartisan.
Right, and we've had, when I reach out, everyone is very, very supportive of it. No one has objected to it. They all see a huge need. One other thing that I think I mentioned is that I think it's, I know that the local control concept, and that I believe that a toolbox or a menu of strategies that schools, principals, middle school principals can pull from Red Ribbon Week. Kelsey's law is actually asking that Kelsey's lesson be taught during Red Ribbon Week. However, what we would like to see is, and I have made a list of resources that could go in a toolbox or a menu that teachers, principals could pull from. Because then I believe that if they have a choice, then what happens is they own that choice, and then they can pick one they feel most comfortable with. I want to give a shout out to Sandy Snodgrass. She's been with the school district. She's a task force member, also Air National Counter Drug. They're part of our task force. And what they have been doing in your high schools this last week is phenomenal. And I really want to give a shout out to that, to get that information out. And I think, again, those parents and toolbox are just imperative so that people can feel comfortable pulling what they feel comfortable using.
Well, Mr. Carson, thank you. One last, okay, yeah, one last call for questions. So member Lessons?
I guess this is not a question. I wanted to extend my appreciation, Mr. Carson, for taking the time to be here today, to give me and all of the other board members a bit of a background in where you've come from, where we've come from as a state. And I appreciate your thoughts on HB6. I'm thinking about the item for discussion today is a potential revision of board policy 5131.6 as brought forth by member Jacobs. And I think it's timely and important. I think it's designed to get both in alignment with and ahead of HB6, but perhaps we might have a bit of time. I'm a little bit cognizant, actually, I'm very cognizant that I can't really see who's in the room, but I know that our the person in charge of our health curriculum is out of town right now, and she would be, Melanie Sutton would be deeply aware of where Kelsey's lesson may or may not be part of our schools. I think she'd be an excellent person to involve in the conversation. And I went and Madam President shared that the Alaska Association of School Boards has what looks like an updated version of 5131.6. There's some new language in their document that's not in ours about making sure that we're connecting with students who may have limited English literacy. There's a change from the board may appoint a district-wide school community advisory committee to a shall appoint an advisory committee, and a bit more about that committee. There's some new language about instruction and related materials stressing the dangers of alcohol and prohibited drugs. So I appreciate member Jacobs' suggested changes. I think that maybe we need more time than today's meeting will allow to maybe begin with the AASB version, consider member Jacobs' suggestions. I know I had my own changes, and Mr. Carson, I appreciate your, I put a star next to the recognition of trauma, and in a draft that I circulated this morning, that was part of what I included in a potential rewrite. So I guess I'm saying that I think that there's interest and will, but I think we need a bit more time to pull something really relevant and timely and effective together. That's a long statement.
Your comments, I just wanted to, I remember what I wanted to mention about curriculum. When I visited the Matsu Health curriculum, that has not been revised, which could be state curriculum, health curriculum, since 2017. So there is no mention of opioids at all in the curriculum. Also, if I'm not mistaken, the DEED e-learning module called Opioids 101, that is a resource for teachers. It only mentions the word fentanyl, does not describe it, does not give any indication of the newest trends around fentanyl, rainbow fentanyl. And I called up Deed and asked them, and they said that they're only responsible for the platform and that Health and Social Services is required or responsible for the content. And they said, and I asked them, and they said that there's no way that they could update that content for a year or two. So that is the issue when we have HB 6, when it says that Deed will create the guidelines that will create the curriculum for opioids.
It will take a lot for them to do that.
And that's why Kelsey's lesson is ready to drop.
And the other thing for me is, I know that our schools are doing some things. I just want to know what those things are.
So we had Ms. Snodgrass, Air National
Yeah.
Guard, DEA, all
Right,
come
shaving
in.
pits, yep.
They all came in and gave a big presentation. That was the focus of
Showed
our leadership.
maybe dead on arrival.
Yep. And so all of our middle schools and high schools have, if they haven't done it already, it's this week. Shown the video to every kid in classrooms and then have
Unless
all the high
their
schools.
parents opted them out.
Actually, we didn't know. I don't think we
You
gave
didn't
that
ask?
opportunity.
Okay.
Because we think that we
Oh,
figured
it's
it's
a
so
life or
much
death
important.
situation.
And then, or they've had full school, most of the high schools have had full school assemblies and every single principal has said that you could hear a pin drop in those assemblies because the kids are taking it seriously. And
I think, I just want to add the caveat, if we start changing the language from overdose to poisoning, I think what will happen is that will also
That's-
catch their attention.
that's pretty much the message, that the principals all took this very seriously, and then we said,
Congratulations.
you will be doing this at middle schools and high schools. One of the things that I appreciate that we're gonna have a curriculum and what have you, but I do believe that we have two different times in the year that we need to make this a priority. One is in the fall in October, but one is now.
Graduation,
Year,
yes.
because we have graduations, we have proms, and we have an entire summer with the kids going into this.
Exactly.
And that is a lot of times when we aren't gonna be there, because all of our schools now have the kits and know how to use them. I mean, we've used them already in our
Yeah.
schools, right?
Because the 5 were revived on campus.
Yeah. So, but anyways, as far as the academics go, it almost takes forever to get a curriculum through the state and all this,
Oh,
but
yeah,
here,
we can't wait.
we aren't waiting here. And we appreciate all the help because we think we gotta get it out there.
So Michael, you have a card, because I'm thinking,
All my correspondence is there.
I can just go from the emails.
Yes.
Okay,
So,
right.
and so then I wanna, I guess, first touch on member Lesson's comments and then what member President Bellamy mentioned. So there is a proposed bylaw change that incorporates language and some of the points from House Bill 6 into our current board policy 5131. Thank you, Madam President, for bringing forward the updated version from AASB. I think that there's a way to incorporate both the base update from AASB, the changes, some of the best changes from House Bill 6, in addition to some of the suggestions Member Lessons made. In terms of a time frame, my suggestion is this: our dates of our meetings this month happen so that our next board meeting is on the 22nd, while our next governance meeting is on the 25th. I'm wondering if it might be possible to connect both myself, yourself, Madam President, as well as Member Lessons, since we appear to be the three interested parties on this, partner for a revised version that will go on the governance meeting, but also potentially in non-action status on the 22nd, with a full analysis and discussion on the 25th in governance. And then if a substitute version comes from governance on the 25th, we could just move that substitute version in our first meeting in June.
Okay, and that could possibly work, but the people who I need to hear from aren't in the room. But they will, we can make sure if they're,
This would give us
Available.
multiple weeks to get with those
Yeah.
folks, yeah.
okay, so I shared the AASB version. Now, and again, these are all proposed, but I think there's good stuff in it, and I think you need to come talk to the school board association, and I'll talk to you about that later. But I think to answer your question, absolutely, yes. I think we can make that work, that timeline work. If Dr. Bryant can make it work and staff.
You should have the staff back to consult that.
Okay.
Some people have mentioned that the community effort that you're working with the colleagues in Fairbanks and Kingman and Juneau could actually be more of that grassroots bottom
mhm.
up, which makes it that much more potent and makes it that much more effective,
Mhm.
because then it's you people that are on the ground
Right.
that see the need
Mhm.
and are doing something, rather than waiting for the state.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's what we saw with Senate Bill 99 with financial literacy, to be frank. I think.
Right, we were ahead of that game as well.
But we were also the inspiration for, I think, a bill to take
Yeah.
something that was necessary and beneficial for students statewide. So I do want to be cognizant of time. Mr. Carson, thank you so much.
No
for
worries.
Thank you
making
so
time for
much.
us.
I'll be in touch.
Yeah, and my phone number, if you want to put it in your phone,
Give it to me. I'm not that fast.
907
Mhm,
315
mhm.
4988. I was born in 49, gonna live to be 88.
All right, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And Willie Nelson just got inducted to the Hall of Fame.
Yes, he
Yeah,
did.
go.
Well, thank you, Mr. Carson.
Yes, thank you for everything that you're doing. I appreciate your upstream primary prevention. It's just imperative that we save our.
Appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Member Lessons, I saw your hand up briefly before we move on to our next agenda item.
Yeah, a quick point of clarification with respect to the meeting on the 23rd. Maybe Ms. Foster can clarify when a potential document would need to be ready. Like,
Be ready no later than,
Will we publish on Saturday, the 20th?
Yeah. it will.
well,
no, there's like a 9-day thing.
the packet is released to you, to the board by Tuesday, the 16th.
Right.
So it'd have to be fully approved by Monday, the 15th.
I would say, I mean, this is my, I'll add my sense to the
But we're into
conversation.
June now, right?
No,
We've-
May.
Oh, May.
It's our
we've-
last board meeting, students.
But we've seen the, if we provide board members both the AASB version, the draft version, as well as member lessons comments, I think in essence, everyone will be fully briefed on what the proposed version might contain.
Yeah.
And so I don't see any lack of notice concerns. I think as long as we put a placeholder in the document and make sure it's published before the 20th and then discussed again on
That is-
governance on the 25th,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
more public notice than frankly anything we've passed this year. So I'm comfortable with it. Member Lessons, I appreciate the points, but yeah, I think there's a way to maneuver in the best interest of public notice for sure.
Yeah, you're correct, but there could be a placeholder.
Okay,
Yeah, that was the only thing I could think of, is a placeholder.
Yeah.
And then that gives us more time. now.
right, okay, perfect. Okay, I appreciate the thought, Member Lessons. I mentioned the 22nd is the 23rd. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on then to AR 6115B land acknowledgement. Is this an update from Dr. Brian King?
Sure, Sam, would you like to walk through that, AR?
So we had the approval of the land acknowledgement at the last board meeting, and this is the AR in regards to when it would be appropriate to be used in our schools. So the land acknowledgements, we acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people, who have worked with Finland for thousands of years. The Dena'ina people have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. ASD is committed to diversity and inclusion, and it is with honor and respect that we recognize all Indigenous people who live and learn in our community. So the thought around this is the land acknowledgement shall be read directly after the Pledge of Allegiance or national anthem at all formal assemblies involving speakers and visitors. The land acknowledgement shall be read at all music and theater performances. Land acknowledgement shall be read at all sporting events where announcers present. So there's like seating games and that kind of stuff where there's no announcer. So if there's like a football game, a basketball game where there's an announcer where we're actually doing it. Usually you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem at those anyways, but we wanted to make sure that it's for that. And then the principal and faculty shall determine when the land acknowledgement should be read at other assembly meetings. Reading it at a crazy pep assembly probably isn't going to be one, but reading it at say a drug
Awards
assembly,
recognition.
awards recognitions, honor board assemblies, that kind of stuff would be very appropriate. So, any
I want to hear
questions?
from what you guys say.
I think
In
that,
this ed.
sorry, this is Helena Batman, the director for Title VI and Minor Ed. I think this has been a very thorough process that we've gone through. We've done the research, we worked with the Kootenai tribe as asked, we've collaborated with an administration. We've come up with a land acknowledgement that tied both the Kootenai's values and what we as a district value for.
And the whole sense of community, I love it.
So I think it's ready. I think that we put a lot of effort into this, and principals are actually excited. They reached out and said, hey, can we get copies of it? We'd like to start today. So we are ready.
The piece that's missing for me is publishing it on our website, unless that is just going to be a, have we done, I know we used to have the old one on there.
It's gonna be on there. If it hasn't there, I'll check.
I don't know, I haven't looked lately, but we will replace whatever was there, because we had a version there.
Yeah.
And Amanda, we'll have to change my
I will
note.
have it ready for you for Tuesday.
And it has been being used already too. It's-
Yeah.
And we have presented to the principals already.
So I just want to thank Dr. Bryant and your administration, Ms. Batman, Mr. McDonough, for all the work that got us to this point. We were very intentional and deliberate about making sure this was a process that we were going to be happy with at the end. And so if your team is happy with this, they are, I think I'm content with it. I appreciate it. I know this won't require board approval, so this is notification, and so this goes into effect, or this is in effect now essentially. Okay, all right. Any comments? So member President Bellamy's touched, member Lessons, any comments before we move on?
Job well done. Thank you all.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you for that. Then we'll move on to the NAC resolution and policy recommendation. So this was a last minute addition from myself. Member Holloman asked to chair the meeting, and I wanted to have a space to discuss this briefly because I think that there potentially could be an opportunity for the board to be involved, but I also wanted to collaborate with administration. We've really developed a great working relationship this year since Dr. Bryant's come on, and so I want to keep that going. I think that there's my sense is that the board will support at least having a discussion on the record about the recommendations that are contained in the resolution and the report that was chiefly drafted by, the report I believe was drafted by Mr. McDonough. I guess I'm curious for administration's perspective on how and in what form you would like the board to take action to direct administration to do that. Is this something that administration is already in process of doing? Would you like the board's support? I know that sometimes there's different perspectives. We speak with only one voice, and so interested in getting your perspective there.
Yeah, sure, Member Jacobs, that's a great question. So I had a great conversation with Suella, who was chairing the NAC, the NAC, and ultimately we learned a couple things. One, that there is some work that needs to be done around curriculum, and it's not going to happen overnight, but she provided some really concrete suggestions as to which schools we should be visiting that have really embraced culturally responsive curriculum. So I've asked them to start looking at those schools, figuring out what needs to happen so we can make sure that our curriculum is as responsive and relevant as possible for all of our students, and particularly our Alaska Native students. So I think no board action is needed on that end. But that said, I would say the number one thing that the NAC was most concerned about was the future of the youth immersion program. So I shared that I'm personally committed to supporting this program through its full expansion, but I think at the board level, what will be helpful is just that commitment in terms of the funding and resources needed to take that to the finish line. I believe right now the program serves up to 4th grade, so we definitely want to completely build it up through the elementary school and then the middle school and then beyond. But as we discussed during our budget conversations, there is an investment and we think it's worth it as it's one of the only 2 programs of its kind in the state.
Can I add on
And,
to,
yeah.
I also met with an external evaluator of the UPIC immersion program 2 days ago and talked about some strategies to actually beef up some of the enrollment in that program, and I've already got my elementary ed folks working on that, so that we can try to get more students involved with that, as well as once we move the Alaska Native Charter School over to Davaloo School, hopefully we get back more of that enrollment as well. I know that wasn't part of this, but we're really talking about both of those at that level.
So a follow-up, I guess, from my perspective, I appreciate the information and request for support on the EPIC immersion program. is there one of the ways I'm hoping, I want to keep this at the board's and administration's forefront, and we are more active than President Bellamy said any board in her recent memory. But stuff is at risk of falling off the radar because we're so big. But one of the ways we can tie to make sure that this retains center stage in terms of our values and priorities is tying it to a goal or a guardrail. So is there a possibility of an interim goal or an interim guardrail that's related to this work that we can make measurable? Is that something administration could consider?
That's something I want to give thought to, and I know that there's a
And that's-
process that we'll be following for.
And that's actually one of the things we're going to talk about in June.
Okay.
Because I think the board needs to provide more guidance. We need to have a discussion and then provide, give more of I think the roadmap is already here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the full board needs to discuss what that's gonna look like. So that process we use, we keep, delete, or modify. I think there's also another area we can add.
Right.
So, that's what we had planned for June.
Well, so maybe out of June, we can take a look and see, what measures we want to formally vote on as a board to adopt, what are going to be incorporated into goals. I want to make sure that we're going about it the right way too, but it sounds like administration's on board with many of these suggestions and changes, which is exciting.
And then as I mentioned, I think where the board's going to be very helpful is the support for expanding that program despite the additional investment. But it's such a special program, it's so important to the community.
But I think have a-
Member lessons also has a question.
Oh, okay, I'll let her go.
Member lessons, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. So I spent quite a bit of time with the resolution and then also that 33-page report. So there's a lot of stuff there to digest. And I think a lot of that's going to go to the administration to really work through the nuts and bolts. But I think that it will behoove us as a board to consider whether we would want to create a SMART goal for elevating Indigenous language development, or whether that would be one of those indicators that would then support, our current existing goals. So I think it'll be a good conversation to add to that June retreat. I did want to share I spent the whole weekend at the Science of Reading Symposium, and there were a couple of things of note that seem relevant here. Number one, I'm aware that DEED is working, I think, in partnership with folks at the University of Oregon to develop the M-Class Amplify screener in, I think, 10 Alaska Native languages. So I don't think that's happening immediately, and I could be a little bit off, but that was one of my takeaways. And I think that's going to be something that ASD might be able to benefit from as we move forward with a real focus on reading. And two, maybe this is really a question for the administration as we move forward. One of the featured speakers at that symposium was Dr. Julie Washington, who is a researcher at UC Irvine, and her work focuses on how dialect and culture impact assessments. And, she spoke about the cognitive load that students bring to that work of learning when, even if they are speaking English, it is with more or less of a dialect. And so I think a question for us, maybe as we move forward in some degree, is going to be how are we going to work to understand the role of dialect and culture in our own data? So that really isn't a direct question or comment, but I just wanted to share some of the learning that I took from that symposium as far as it might have bearing on this conversation, I think, as we move forward.
Thank you, Member Lessons. Yeah, I think it speaks to why we want to have an interim goal related to this work that's measurable, we follow up on regularly, from my perspective anyway. Madam President?
And I don't disagree at all. And I probably should have talked to Dr. Bryant about this, just one-on-one, but it appears to me that there is a vacuum between leadership and Indigenous education. When Doreen Brown had the position years ago, she was a senior director. So for me, that actually means that there is no space between the needs of our Indigenous students and the superintendent. So now it appears to me that that is a vacuum. Now, I can't tell the superintendent how to fill that vacuum. I know we have very qualified people. And the fact that we do not have a senior director of Indigenous education in a district the size of Anchorage doing the kind of work we're doing, I just think we need to revisit that somehow. Because when you don't, when Indigenous education is not at the table, we're missing it. And it can't just be up to our Native Advisory Committee. They're wonderful. They're hardworking people, but there needs to be a direct line of communication to the superintendent. Direct, no space, no pause, maybe across the highway, I mean, the aisle, but, so I would like for us at some point to try to get an understanding around that. Since we are doing some restructuring, we're doing some realignment in terms of who's doing what and who's reporting to whom. For me, I would like to see a more direct line of communication with the superintendent. Cabinet should not be meeting without an Indigenous perspective. I'm just.
No, Madam President, I frankly agree. I think our data, when we are doing goal monitoring, shows that there's a structural challenge there to overcome, and I am confident Dr. Bryant is going to address it. I don't know, Dr. Bryant, did you want to respond or provide perspective at this point, or?
I think it's helpful to get that perspective, and Madam President, perhaps I can get kind of some more historical background. The structure as it was something that I inherited, and I'm not really sure what the background was.
I think Andy would have been the only one here. I think Marty might have some background, because Marty would have been, but he wouldn't have a direct background.
And I'll circle around the subject, try to gather some perspective, but the way that it was kind of bundled to me was we're bundling student support services to have that direct line. So now I want to dig a little deeper to understand where does the role of Indigenous education, how do we connect that link to senior leadership if that's not happening now? So I take that.
And maybe it is happening, and I don't know from my perspective.
No,
I just know that we have, for me, we're missing some steps.
I would submit, I don't think we're missing anything, but I think, to be fair, Dr. Bryant's only been in the job for a year, but I think this is an opportunity to be transformational, way to have that voice and perspective at the table for every decision that's made, to make sure we're getting perspective. And I'll use the English language curriculum, the ELA curriculum adoption that we went through. There was gaps in that process.
Both at the state and local.
Right, but I can't control, I wish
I
I could
know.
control the state.
Can't control the
But
state.
we can't control our process, and so I think if we had that structure you're speaking to, Madam President, we would have had a more seamless and potentially agreeable process in the board, at least for myself. And so I think there's room there. Sounds like an exciting conversation. I'd be glad to be a part of it, but I think we can leave that there now unless there's other comments in the room or online.
Nope.
Okay. So then we'll move on to, thank you everyone for that. Moving on to health education curriculum updates. Is that, Dr. Brian, is that your team's? Or is that?
I don't either.
I honestly don't remember
I think that
at
was
this
the
point
last-
how it got on. I think
We
Andy,
just forgot to take it out.
no, Andy Holloman had
Oh,
asked
that's
for it
right.
to be on here, but he's not here.
Okay.
So we can probably, and then our last, and Pat is also not here. So
Okay, so last two items, okay.
That's it.
So we're very official there. We have a new business section on our agenda. Is there any new business?
Good business
Okay.
for governance.
Or did I miss one? Oh, so yeah, we talked about the audit. That's been Member Higgins'
Yeah. Yeah,
brainchild, and he's not here to discuss, and we don't have a document, I
I
don't
still
think.
haven't received a document.
Okay, so we don't really have much to discuss, but I agree,
I mean, it's been on there like 5 months now.
Yes.
well, the new
But if
committee,
he doesn't submit anything, Mr. Chair, we will not be talking about it.
we do need something to discuss.
Sorry,
although-
that we should have told you earlier. Because here, we just wasted a whole hour of your time.
So, all right, so we have a new
Oh,
business
new
section.
business. I do have some new business.
Madam President.
Based on our reorganization meeting, going back to comments that were made by member Lessons, that timing of, especially with when things are coming to committee, like, you know, with, how do we get things to board members in a more timely way? I think if we follow our process, we might, there won't be a problem. But members, board members should have documents, and staff should have documents before this meeting. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm not sure, I mean, I think if we, I don't know that we need a policy to do it. But maybe we do, I don't know, I mean, because like today, we have 2 items on the agenda, which none of us have seen. And we're not gonna discuss today. So for board members who have items that they want to put on the agenda, or maybe that becomes a chair responsibility.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion,
Yeah.
Madam President. If I were the regular chair of governance, I wouldn't have included health education and audit because I didn't have any
You didn't have
documents for
any-
them.
okay.
My agenda ended at NAC resolution of policy recommendations, but I asked Ms. Foster, because this isn't my committee, to include all of them. And I think out of, point of clarification, I think we got everything out more than 24
Oh,
hours
yeah,
in
this was
advance.
good. So today, this worked, because
Yeah.
board members could see it, staff could see it.
And so I think it
Well,
just speaks
except for
to,
mine, that one, I didn't pull it off the.
I think it
didn't
speaks to
pull it off.
committee chair preparation and having that discretion not to add something to the agenda to distract from staff if we're not going to discuss it in earnest.
So we usually do the agenda a week out, right?
I mean, I try, but for lack of better words, I'm often having to chase down the agenda and I'm not getting it until the day before, so.
Okay, so we gotta do a better job of, it's a chair responsibility thing. We'll work with our chairs, and it's really only, we'll work with the committee chairs.
And with the retreat coming up in June, I think that's something that
Yeah.
we could discuss too.
Okay.
Madam President, just before we go to member lessons, who has their hand raised, have we officially decided on chairs for the,
Yes, they're gonna remain as they are.
member lessons?
Thank you. I would just like to plug that I think at least a 72-hour minimum would be helpful for me in any receiving of any documents to have time to digest and, bring my thoughts together. And then just if we're under new business, I just wanted to share that I had a really interesting conversation when I was stuck in Juneau with one of our educators who shared that earbuds are a big problem when it comes to student engagement in classrooms. And I've done a little bit of probing. There may be a couple of districts around the nation that are banning earbuds. And I would just like to have the conversation maybe informally before I bring anything to a future governance committee meeting about what, administration thinks about the role of earbuds in schools might be. So just wanted to be transparent about something I'm thinking about.
Did you, may I?
Yeah, Madam President.
Member lessons, did you say you got that from one person?
That was it was a one-person conversation, so that there is no scientific survey. But it was a thought-provoking conversation, which may merit a future conversation. And since we had new business, I thought I would mention that.
Yeah, some research on what's happening in our schools, because maybe it's just it's a fluke. Sven's shaking his head. You see him? He said, no, it's real. It's real. Okay.
And we have some high schools that have banned them take that initiative. But it's a growing problem, for sure,
Okay.
as another distraction in addition to cell phones, other things that draw kids' attention away.
Is that something, does anyone know offhand, is that something that's in a board policy or is that a student handbook item?
Whatever's in board policy is in the student handbook. I mean, we've gone to where it's pretty much the
The
student.
same, okay.
So there isn't any difference.
Yeah, so there's 3 levels typically to that, right? So you've got anything that's a board policy related students would show up in the handbook. Secondary, elementary add some unique items as well, and then schools will often add pages unique to school-based policies. So you can have all 3 levels.
They used to be a lot different. They're a lot more.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so member lessons, I'm curious, I'm gonna go dig here at some point to find out what's listed where, but if administration, I think the first item I'm curious about is something administration need to bring forward through an AR, or if it's something the board needs to provide more direction on, like we did with AI, or potentially with the opioid language and alcohol and other drugs policy. And so, yeah, maybe another future governance item for Chair Holloman to consider. Madam President.
One of the things I'd like to see us get back to is the systemic review of policy. Governance is not, we don't know, this committee does not only exist to write, change, revise policy, but we have to review what we currently have, and that should be somewhere we have a rotation of policies that we should be looking at every month so that we can get through the review, the policy reviews within a 3-year period. So within 3 years, we should have looked at every single one of our policies, and I don't think we've been doing that.
So we did that not this year, but the year before when I was chair. And I was
Right.
always
So
published.
we kind of got off, we haven't done it this year.
Okay.
So I will be talking to the chair about that. Assuming he still wants to be the chair. If not, then I'll have to select another chair.
Okay.
But we do need to be, that is one of our primary, I think that's one of the things that should be on the agenda every single time governance meet. Whatever batch of policy we are going to be looking at or reviewing so that people can either say, yeah, we need to have, we need to, it's fine the way it is, the administration looks, we look. Otherwise, so I don't even know where we are. I think the last policy I remember looking at was 5130.
Might be something, Ms. Foster, if you,
I can look it up.
to figure out where we're at.
If I could interject,
Yeah.
I think there might be value in tackling this sort of vision by creating a master calendar, much like we have a 5-year calendar for strategy 2026, where it's very clear what will be reviewed in which month. It
we have-
may behoove us and future boards to have a model 3-year calendar. Based on, I don't know, 10 meetings, 10 governance meetings a year, or whatever the number is.
Yeah, remember, listen, we had that because I used that to
Yeah,
base
we
off
have
of
it,
our,
we just haven't been
our
following.
policy review last school year.
And
So that exists somewhere.
yeah, Amanda's gonna locate that for us, but you're absolutely right, because I don't know if it's, I think it's a 3-year calendar of which policies we look at each year, we break them out based on.
It just goes by the number. It
Yeah, it
goes
just goes
numerical
by the
sequence,
It's a numerical sequence.
Yeah, okay.
And the other piece to that as well is, so Madam President, you brought the AASB updated version of what I call it, alcohol policy, right? That 5131. And that that language wasn't reflected in our current, is not reflected in our current policy. So I don't know if there would be a good way, as we envision a better path forward, to regularly incorporate AASB edits into our own sort of policy revision cycle, or would we just check each time?
Yes, so I think this one is from June of 2022. It usually comes to the board president, the superintendent, and I'll have to go back and look. I send it to, and since I send the copies I get to the committee chair, the governance committee chair, but I'm sure we can find some place online where we can store all the policies, so whoever wants to look at them can look at them. They are proposed policy. We are not compelled to follow it. We do, from time to time, we will accept it as it is. Other times we tweak it to fit our own purposes. So, but yes, I will make sure that we find a way to make these accessible. You have access to AASB, that's one of our member benefits. But you'd have to log in online and look at, as a member, and look at those policies in board book. So we'll figure it out.
Okay, any other new business? Hearing seeing none, or the next governance meeting is later this month on May 25th, as we discussed. We'll make sure, and Ms. Foster, can we make sure we have a placeholder on that one, working with member Holloman for 5131? To continue conversation on that, please, and we'll make sure to get a draft ready for his consideration then. And if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, thank you.